We had a horrible situation unfolding over the weekend in Afghanistan. Think Progress reports, quote, an Afghan clinic run by humanitarian aid group Doctors Without Borders was bombed in a U.S. airstrike on Saturday. 23 staffers and patients were killed and 37 were injured after the bombardment. For a long time, that number was 12 people killed, and then it ticked up to 19 people killed. And now today, some articles are reporting 23 people killed. Now, I should be clear that there still is some dispute, because some articles are still saying 19, but others have come out that say 23. So Think Progress is reporting 23 staffers and patients in total were killed, 37 were injured. Quote, American military forces in Afghanistan admitted they were conducting an airstrike at 2:15 a.m. in Kunduz that may have resulted in collateral damage to a nearby medical facility. Afghan officials, meanwhile, claimed there were 10 to 15 terrorists hiding in the hospital. 12 staffers and 3 child patients were among those killed. I should be clear here and mention that Doctors Without Borders said, absolutely not. There were not 10 to 15 terrorists in the hospital. Quote, according to Doctors Without Borders, U.S. forces continued bombing for 30 minutes after receiving phone calls telling them the hospital was being bombed. One of the nurses who survived said the following, there are no words for how terrible it was. In the intensive care unit, 6 patients were burning in their beds. We saw our colleagues dying. Our pharmacist, I was just talking to him last night and planning the stocks, and then he died there in our office. Now, of course, the U.S. is claiming that this is an accident, and perhaps it is, but here's the upsetting part of the conversation, or further upsetting part of the conversation that very few people want to talk about. It's not like the U.S. wasn't aware that this was a hospital. Of course they were aware that this was a hospital. In fact, U.S. commanders are now saying that Afghan forces asked them for the bombing because they said Taliban operatives were hiding in the hospital. And on top of that, this hospital in the past has been called, quote, controversial. Now, why do they call it controversial? Because this hospital dares to help anybody, no questions asked. So in the past, have they possibly helped Taliban operatives? Yes. Did the Taliban operatives, when they went there, did they have guns and were they ready? Oh, I'm going to kill you if you don't help me. No. They help anybody that comes to them. According to the U.S. and the West, they go, no, that's controversial. We can't allow that. So is it a hospital or is it a terrorist safe haven? I don't know. We're just asking questions here. Oh, did we bomb you? Oh, it was an accident. But the Afghan forces did tell us that they wanted us to bomb there, and we did it, even though we knew it was a hospital. But it was collateral damage, so don't read any further into this. So overall, my takeaway from this is exactly like the stories that we've gotten elsewhere, whether in Pakistan or Yemen or others in Afghanistan or some in Iraq as well, where we learned that the U.S. would bomb the funerals of different Taliban operatives. Now, when they did that, they knew, hey, if we get 1 or 2 more Taliban guys, we're also going to get some women and children, because it's a fucking funeral we're talking about here. And what happened? They decided to bomb either way. So I file this in the same category as that. And this is also like signature strikes. Now, personality strikes are the kind of drone strikes where the government says, we know exactly who we're going after, and we have good intelligence that indicates where they are right now. That's what a personality strike is. A signature strike is, you fit the profile, and we have enough information to maybe say that you're guilty. So, in other words, it might be a cell phone that's allegedly connected to somebody who we think might be a terrorist, and then you go bomb there. So you don't know, but it's enough. It's the same kind of gray area that we're talking about with the bombing of the Taliban funerals, and it's the same kind of gray area that we're talking about with this hospital. But here's the dirty secret. The gray area is not a fucking gray area, any more than it's a gray area when, as we learned from Chris Kyle of all people, the real objective is to target basically any military-aged male in the region. So if you happen to be, military age and male, regardless of what you're doing, it's guilty until proven innocent, which is flipping the burden of proof. Which, by the way, is literal. You might think, oh, he's extrapolating here, he's doing a thought experiment. No! They've said that, they've framed it like that before. The U.S. government says, okay, well, if we kill you with a drone and you're a military-aged male, we're going to assume you're an enemy combatant or an insurgent until proven otherwise. And then, by the way, what's their burden of proof for proving otherwise? Who knows? That's why they always say, oh, yes, no, our rate of getting the right people is really high. And then meanwhile, you have investigative journalist organizations come out and they go, well, that's not true at all. We saw what was happening on the ground, and here's a list of thousands of civilians that you killed. There was one report that said that over 95% of the people killed in drone strikes are not top Al-Qaeda operatives. So this is lunacy that we're talking about here. And it gets to a very fundamental and very basic question. Why do they hate us? Now, I'm not in the crowd that says none of it has to do with religion, none of it has to do with ideology. Of course, there's a significant amount of hatred against the U.S. and others based on pure religious fundamentalism and based on ideological reasons. But also, a lot of the hatred comes from shit like this. When you do stuff like this, you push people into the arms of the fundamentalists. You make it so that people who otherwise were more moderate or they had no horse in the race, now they go, give me an AK-47. I'm going to go kill the goddamn infidel American sons of bitches they're the great Satan for what they did here to the hospital. You think you didn't create at least 1,000 more jihadists from what you're doing here? And by the way, are we allowed to call this terrorism? Or will the government designate me a terrorist for saying that this is terrorism? Because the intentions argument here, it no longer applies. It's no longer just, hey, we meant well, but whoopsie, look what we did. No, I just explained to you the way that it works, how we targeted the funeral of Taliban operatives, where we maybe would get 1 or 2 more Taliban guys, but we knew we would get women and children. Same thing here, they knew this was a fucking hospital. But they said, well, there might have been 10 to 15 Taliban guys there. We don't know for sure, but we're told that might be the case, so we're going to bomb anyway, knowing that there are staffers there and knowing that there are civilians there. This isn't a gray area, guys. This is state terrorism. Now, are there cases where indeed it is just a pure accident and, hey, we got civilians when we were trying to get people who we know are terrorists? I'm sure that's the case, and those are ethically and morally slightly different than what we're talking about here. But here, the gray area is not a fucking gray area. Here, if there was any other regime, any other government around the world that did this, we wouldn't be attempting to rationalize it. We wouldn't be trying to justify it. We would just say, fucking terrorists. It goes back to the idea of human shields, which comes up a lot nowadays, and that's something that some people in the government have used in responding to this. And the argument goes, well, I mean, can you really blame us? You should really blame, if there were Taliban guys there and they were among civilians, blame them because they're using human shields. But I pose the question to you, if they're setting a trap by using human shields, why the fuck would you walk into the trap and become the bad guy? I don't know about you guys, but it's not a fucking moral conundrum for me, human shields. If somebody's robbing a bank and they have somebody in front of them that they're using as a literal human shield, and they're walking out of the bank, and the cops are there, have the cops ever said, shoot through the civilian? What are you waiting for? Kill the civilian and the person behind. The guy's using a human shield, so obviously you kill them all. No, that's not a moral conundrum. That's not a thing. That's not a position that's respectable. This isn't a thing that's debatable. If you're gonna kill the civilian, end of conversation, don't fucking do it. And if you do it, don't you dare say that your critics are the ones that are morally misguided. You're the one that's fucking morally misguided. Imagine that's your mother who's the civilian and the robbers behind them walking out. You have to figure out a different way to approach this. And by the way, why the fuck are we still in Afghanistan, man? So we pulled out of certain regions, and then the Taliban came and took it over. So everybody in the U.S. said, okay, in the government, I should say, said, okay, we got to go back in and take the area back. Here's my response. Why? Let's say we stay there for another 10 fucking years. What, you think that when we leave after 10 years that the Taliban isn't yet again going to come and take over more territory? They are. You're just delaying the inevitable. I don't like the fucking Taliban. I also don't like the regime that's in control in South Sudan. I also don't like the regime that's in control in the Congo. I also don't like the North fucking Koreans. But am I going to spend our blood and treasure and have us be responsible for killing civilians as a result of this? Fuck no, I'm not. So, I need you to stop. My tax dollars, I'm an American citizen. My tax dollars are funding this. I don't want fucking blood on my hands. I don't want my money going towards this shit. I don't care how moral you think you're being. I don't think it's moral. I disagree. Take my money, put it towards healthcare, put it towards education, put it towards turning the fucking water on in Detroit, which apparently you don't have enough money to do, but you could bomb civilians all day long. Use it for almost anything other than this. This is ridiculous. This needs to stop. And yes, this is state terrorism.